travelers. I'm Vlhadus, and I'm joining Vertek and Chibi at the Golden Feather. Come on in, grab a seat, and let's share tales of adventure. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Golden Feather Tavern, where your hosts, Chibi and Vertek, discuss Ashes of Creation and important topics spoken about within the Ashes community. Every week, we invite you, the viewer, and a special guest to pull up a chair, grab a pint, and join the conversation with us. Today is the 10th of August, 2024, and this is episode 219, The Vlad Saga, a bard discussion. With
what is going on?
Traveling bard friend, Vlhadus, how are you today?
Oh, man. Me and Chibi have gone back and forth on when I was going to come back to the tavern. And then I was like, hey, wasn't I supposed to come back? And you're like, I am so sorry. Like, I don't think I put you on the list. So it was fine. Dude, y'all have many guests that y'all bring on. The fact that you're even on episode 219 is utter craziness. Like, oh my God, you're doubled like what a lot of podcasts are in this space. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, same. And I actually had him on the list twice. That had to be like, so which one do you want?
Yeah.
I remember that.
Oy.
My gosh.
It's all right. We like having you on so often that we like to double and triple up just to make sure we got a date for you.
We gotta get that, fill of Vlhadus time where, this is gonna be cringe, but oh well. As the community says, the Vladdy Daddy time.
The Vladdy Daddy time.
That's right. Was that Burns? Did Burns say that?
I think so, yeah.
Oh
my gosh. Hi everybody. I'm a little hyper today. I'm sorry. It's been a great day. It's been a very productive day here in the TGF household, so I'm pretty excited.
It has.
But today we are going to be talking about some bard combat. Definitely, if you guys don't know, Vlhadus is like really well known for doing things on classes and skills and stuff like that. So I want to get his thoughts on the skill tree for bard. And then we're going to talk about some CC and ashes, or like the I forgot what it's called, right? Something control.
Crowd control.
Crowd control, thank you. I'm so used to calling it CC.
CC, yeah.
And then some other random topics from you guys from other places. But of course, the most important topic is Vlhadus. So, Vlhadus, how have you been? How's content creation since we last had you on?
Oh, wow. Content creation has been a little crazy. I've been streaming a hell of a lot more than I've been actually making my curated YouTube content. I'm in the process of making 2 videos right now. One that's like more about the, I was telling you about it earlier in a little bit of the pre-show about the talent system. There's a video that I'm making towards the fundamental state of the current ability talent system, and then I'm making another video on why 2020 was the most pivotal year for Ashes of Creation. That's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, I look forward to those actually. Always a good conversation with you on skill trees and skill tree setups and how they could be designed better. And I know that you have a few thoughts on those. But
I definitely do.
What are your thoughts and your plans for content going forward into Alpha 2?
Well, it's like I told my chat, I want to be streaming and making videos based off of singular systems or pain points, bug fixes, or just basically highlighting the entire feedback process. And I want to basically make videos in a way that highlights things that Intrepid's doing really well in, things or systems that I feel need some work, things that don't work at all, systems that could have, what's the point of this system? Like, I don't see where it goes, like because there's sometimes in games, right, you have like a system and it's supposed to have like a design influence on certain things, but it feels very like fluff, like there's no substance to it, right? So my whole goal is to just, once we get in the alpha 2, is to really test a lot of the main systems. Like for me, I'm going to be testing, of course, classes, abilities, the talent systems, the weapons, professions, and I'll do some stuff on like the story arcs or like questing and stuff like that, but most of my feedback is going to be around the synergies of abilities, how combat feels, because I think that is the most important thing that we can really solidify before the launch.
Okay, fair.
I like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited overall. Like, it's just one of those things where I've been streaming a lot more. I was telling Chibi earlier that my wife is gone. My chat knows that too. Like, there's some people in chat now, and it's been hell. Like, I was supposed to stream this morning, and for those of you guys that I said yesterday, hey, I'm gonna be streaming twice tomorrow. I'll be streaming 11 a.m. and then I'll be at live with the Golden Feather. I have not been sleeping well at all. Ever since my wife has been gone, it's been hell. I do not sleep well at all. So I slept till like almost 1 p.m. today, but I woke up like every 2 hours last night. So yeah, let me see why smoke detectors are going off. Yeah, in my head, nice. Definitely. In my head, they have been going off. So it's been hard, but I'm glad we can have, of course, this conversation today about Bard and just in general. It's always great talking with you guys, which is why I love going on Tuesdays about the tavern talks. Those have been great.
Yes. It's great having you on Tuesdays too, because that's a much more relaxed conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Obviously, these are a little bit more structured so that we can get through different topics. But I love just being able to relax and chit chat on Tuesdays with you.
Yeah,
and same. Of course the chat too. We're interactive with our chat on Friday or Saturdays. I almost said Fridays. We're interactive with our chat on Saturdays, but we're more interactive on Tuesday. Are you doing the dishes? That's the minimum.
Yeah, Rocco wants to make sure you're doing the dishes at least.
Oh yeah, today I basically just cleaned the house. It wasn't really that dirty, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was good to go.
Yeah, that's what I did today too. I did a bunch of house keep up. Excited for the end of the month because we're gonna go to PAX West, so I'm like, may as well get that a head start. But Vertec, do you have any other questions? Otherwise, I'll keep firing them at him.
Oh, I keep shooting them a couple. I'm getting some other stuff prepped up here.
Well, in preparation, because I feel like this is going to be a great segue for in a moment. So in preparation for today's topics on the actual combat system with Bard, we were talking a little bit pre-show about, skill trees and things like that. How do you feel about the way that the Bard skill tree is set up compared to some of the other class skill trees? Do you like it more? Do you like it less?
To me, it's and that's the kind of problem that I feel like the talent system has, is that why do all the skill trees feel completely different? There's no uniformity to them. I think it's going to be very confusing from someone that wants to jump from one class to another, and it just feels very odd, right? Like, oh, okay, like this is how this tree works when this, I mean, again, they could work similarly, but this is also looking at from the lens that I'm not playing Ashes of Creation right now. I don't know how these, trees work. But
of course they're in a work in progress, so it could be like,
right,
knows,
like this
Bard's tree is their way of trying out a different way of doing a tree.
Exactly. Like, you got to look at it as like, this is template 1, this is template 2, template 3, and this could just be another template for them to kind of see, like, well, does this, because again, like I was telling you earlier, a lot of the people that I've talked to about the talent trees, the best, most positive response that I get is a meh. Like, the trees look meh, and that's not a good barometer, at least in my head. I want people to be really excited for these trees, but it's hard developing this stuff the way that gets the kind of customization that I am kind of used to, of course, from being a WoW player. And so, like, these abilities, like, if you look at them, most of them are actual abilities, right? So you just see there a bunch of squares, right? And the only stuff that you actually have, if you're looking on the wiki right now, you have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is the very one top, is a work in progress. We don't even know what that is. And then of course we have the masteries, which I think is really, really good. I love that. I think that is a really good thing. And then of course at the very bottom you have the instrument, right? Which is more cosmetic, right? But I mean it's not really a sense of customization as far as the actual skills go. I think the skills, and I was kind of telling you earlier, this kind of is, I'm going to go a little bit into my video, but I think the skills should have either, like when you click on the actual skill, like you could have potentially 2 trees, one for augmentation and one for just basic customization, right? Because my whole thing is that I think every foundational base archetype needs customization in a skill. And I don't like the Lost Ark approach of a tripod system where you have to select one of 3 options. But I think, having anywhere between 4 to potentially 6 options of customization per a skill would be okay. And again, this is also not indicative of any kind of a final product, right? We all know that the max level for Ashes of Creation is going to be 50. So these trees are going to inevitably, if they stick to this kind of a format, they're going to be really huge. So another way to sort of condense them is, I think, kind of like the way they're doing their weapon system, which is working from the bottom up. The approach with these ability trees is that they kind of want you to have multiple starting areas. And again, I don't know if that's going to feel good. I am not playing Ashes of Creation. It's just looking at it from just an outside perspective.
Right.
But I think that the skills need to have multiple ways of customization to add not even just flavor, but just to not be stale, right? Again, if you can only select this ability and all the customization comes from is just, okay, I'm not going to play this ability anymore, I'm going to play this other ability, that's going to get, especially with all the customization there, it's going to get stale. For people like myself, people that really value, I can add like these 3 passives to this one ability that makes it like super powerful, or makes it powerful in a very niche situation, right? To where if I get a crit, it takes 5 seconds off of its cooldown. If I do something else, it actually hits a secondary target. Like all those kinds of things, like make combat more interesting and fun to a person like myself. And I just really haven't seen anything like that from these trees. And if you go to look at the fighter talent tree, there actually is some really good passives, like especially to lunging assault is a really good one. Lunging assault, there's a passive for that one that adds a secondary charge, right? And it actually lowers the cooldown, I believe. And that's a really good passive, but that's one example that there should also be probably 3 other examples of similar kinds of passives to that same ability. There should be some kind of mix and match there.
Do you think that some of those other passives may end up coming from a secondary to add to the options? Or do you think...
But the thing is, though, is that we also don't know, because in my head, the augment system is going to be one of 4 choices. So similar to the Lost Ark tripod system, you have 3 options, but you can only select one out of the 3 options. I believe that's how the augment system is going to work. You're not going to be able to augment all 4 schools in that ability. So you should have both. You should have the customization from the base skill from your primary archetype, and also the customization of your secondary augment. You should have both in my head, not just one or the other.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you thought maybe it would add to the option list versus like replacing.
No, for sure. It should add. Like I said, there could be, if there is a skill that has only 3 passive options of customization, you could add, of course, the augment tree will be the 4th, right? Depending on what you pick. So I am totally fine with that. But I just want there to feel like there's actual customizing of abilities, even at a base level, like from 1 to 25. We all know that there's going to be stuff to customize augment wise from 26 to 50, but I'm just more talking about that first range.
Right. So, makes sense.
So you think that giving that level 1 to 25 just a chance to get familiar with, 1, the game for newer players, and for 2, the class and maybe like alternate quest lines and whatnot for repeat players wouldn't be just a valid use of that, just kind of as it sits right now. And the only reason I ask is because I think that if they were to add 3 or 4 options for every single skill, for every single archetype, and then also add augmentations on top of all of that, I think that gets into the territory of far too much to manage.
So again, I'm basically telling my whole video, but so when you're playing the game like World of Warcraft, right? You know, and again, this is where my expertise kind of comes from, right? And I know some people hate World of Warcraft. I totally get it. I understand. But you don't have, like, in my head, if you can pick, let's say, 4 abilities, you know, you're level 3 in Ashes of Creation. If you pick Lunging Assault as one of your abilities, you have, let's say, 4 options to customize that ability. But since you're level 3, you don't have any way to customize that ability yet. Like, so as you level, now you can unlock the first passive option for Lunging Assault, let's say at level 9. You unlock the second one at level 14. You unlock the third one at level 19, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like you should have some kind of a way where it unlocks naturally as you're leveling, so you can understand the base ability first. And as you're leveling, now you can start selecting other options to those abilities if you want to. Because again, it's a risk versus reward. You have 50 talent points that you're potentially going to get for your skills, right? Yeah. And so with that, you have limited options in the sense if you want to have, like, you know, more skills, then you can't really put a lot of points into those passives, because if you want to have more abilities there, again, you can't have both, right? You can either customize one ability very heavily to make it a very, like, a powerhouse ability, which means you're not going to have that many abilities overall if you choose to do that.
Yeah,
that's your choice, right? So, like, if you want to have only like 9 abilities, but all 9 abilities are heavy customized and they're just really, really nice, and that means you're not going to have a varied toolkit for all scenarios, right? So that's my approach.
That makes sense. Really quick, I want to try and also include the chat in some of this. So Wyoni says, my take on the talent trees was that they modified more towards the way presented in the Bard showcase, meaning they're going to go back and change the others based on feedback. Keyboard Oracle over on one of the other platforms we're streaming on says, I'd like to see the talent tree change based on the order you choose talents, your race, node type, secondary, etc. And so I think there's a lot of ideas, and I mean, Intrepid is really looking at making a unique way of building out your character, and I think there's only so much that you can do before you again get too confusing, especially when thinking of, like, there's a good number of people, I don't want to say a majority, but I would say like around 10 or more of people that have just never touched an MMORPG that I've heard about that are coming into Ashes. So the other thing is, like, thinking of somebody who's never touched an MMORPG, how well is that going to be designed for them to understand everything that's happening, in addition to making sure that there's not so much information that it becomes overwhelming and then people just kind of like put it off instead of actually use it.
You know what would have been great? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it seems it's a tough balance that you have to strike. It seems like.
You know what would have been great is if they had just split the talent trees up into 4 separate trees that are progressive from bottom to top or top to bottom, like we're used to seeing in a lot of MMOs, and they're separated by their schools of augments.
I think you were gonna say that.
As you're playing, say, a tank, and let's assume that, like, because they haven't really said anything about it, like what the schools of augments are for everybody, but let's assume tank is what, like, mitigation, threat, sustain, and control, I guess.
Right.
Something. Let's call it a health instead of sustain. So there would be 4 separate little tiers that would actually have to do with that, or 4 separate trees that would have to do with that, going from bottom to top. And I think that would work out all right, because then it's at least it's isolated. You know that if you're heavily going for a control type tank, you're going to be heavily invested in this one tree. If you're really going for mitigation and control, you're going to be kind of split between them, with a little bit of sprinkling in here and there in the other way. I think Looking at how the Bard one is done up, I feel it's kind of like the squares are just on the table and you just select whatever one you want.
Basically, it to me, it doesn't feel, I'm not going to use the word meaningful, but it doesn't feel fun. Again, like I find a lot of fun in customizing the Bard. If you just look at the Bard talent tree for the abilities, there's no customizing. You're really just selecting abilities at that point. Like I said, there's like 3 passive options, and then of course there's the mastery options. Again, I think the mastery options is really cool, but is that something that's going to be in all class talent trees, right? Or is every primary archetype going to have masteries that you can select from? I wouldn't mind if there was. I think again, there's just a lot of passive stuff that they could add to either the base primary type. There's also passives they can add to have synergies between multiple abilities, right? So that way you want to use this ability first and then complement the second ability. Like I like that kind of interactions. I like tooling and crafting my kit in a way that feels like I made this. Like this is all like based off of my own customizing and how I choose to play this class. It just there isn't that yet, but also the talent tree doesn't lend itself yet to it doesn't have the proper foundation. This is like the entire point of the video is I think these talent trees don't lend themselves yet to having the proper foundation of executing the abilities and passives the way I think we as gamers want, because most games, like again, you don't select passive or you don't select abilities by putting a talent point into them. Like you usually just earn them by just leveling, right? That's how most MMOs do it. Not all MMOs, but most MMOs. And again, there's some MMOs that do have abilities that you earn from a talent tree, like maybe some special cooldowns or maybe some transformative abilities that you have this ability A, and then by selecting this talent, it transforms that ability into ability B, you know, like that kind of stuff. And I love that stuff. Like that's the whole point of talent trees. That's the whole point of making your class feel completely different from someone else's, right? That's what I love about it. Again, even for some games like Final Fantasy 14, like I love Final Fantasy 14, but the reason why I never stuck with that game is because there's no customization. You are a carbon copy of every other black mage or every other ninja or every other dragoon. And I usually like MMOs where I find myself being, oh, well, I chose to play these particular talents, or I chose to do these particular things. It's just what I find fun.
And Keyboard says anything that pushes away from a meta. In addition to what you're saying. Yeah. Well,
and again, like I was having this discussion earlier with my buddy Roar. In WoW, you know, you go look at a guide on Wowhead or Icy Veins, and you're playing like a Ret Paladin or a Beastmaster Hunter, and you see, oh, well, I have to talent this way. But also, if you go and look up like the damage differencing of like ability A to ability B, it's so minute now. Like it's 0.3% extra damage, 0.5% extra damage. Like you can truly play what you want, but I think people are also slaves to seeing something on screen that all of the top people are playing, and they want to feel like the top player themselves. I just, like I've always said, you got to think on your own, man. You got to just do a little bit of research and figure out that, hey, if this ability is more fun for you, then play that ability. You're not going to do terrible.
Yeah. That brings me to the next topic that I'm trying to get us over into, which is Bard combat. How did you feel Bard looked during the combat scenes while we're watching Bucky essentially play the Bard class?
Again, from my perspective, I've never played a support class before, but the combat didn't feel that interactive, because again, you're more it's like asking how the combat feels as a healer, right? Like your function isn't to do combat. Your function is to heal the party and get everyone topped off. So I don't think combat is supposed to feel very like super engaging like the way a DPS class is supposed to be. But I think what I really saw that it excels in is of course the buffing, the utility, the I think the utility skills on the bard are freaking amazing. Like, and again, like when you have a bard in your party, I forgot who was playing cleric, but he's like, oh my god, a bard player feels so good when you're playing a cleric, and that's the way it's supposed to feel, right? You're supposed to feel like this person, you know, is propping you up. It's propping the group up in a completely different way. That, like, you know, the tank props up the group in a way that, hey, I take the damage, you guys don't. You know, hey, as a healer, I do the heals, you guys don't. You know, as a damage dealer, I do the damage, you guys don't. You know, it's like every primary function is met that way. And I know my boy Nemesis, I don't know if he's in chat right now, but he called you know, because we always talk about the holy Trinity, right? And you know, now we're kind of, you know, talking about the holy diamond, because now we're adding the fourth portion of support, right? And I think the bard does a really, really good job of showcasing just how powerful, like, buffing, debuffing, adding mana, adding heals, but also like my feedback mostly with the combat from the bard is the tome. I really love the tome. I think the spell book, I would love it to be a little bit more slower, but actually AoE a little bit better, right? I think that would be really, really cool. So that way, if they're talking about a two-handed sword, right, like, it should actually be a little bit more broader sweeping. So I think 3 projectiles should be minimum, in my opinion, not just one additional one. I think it seems kind of lame, but I love the way it's being done. But yeah, the combat to me, it wasn't that riveting, because again, the bard that's not their bread and butter is combat. It's the utility, it's the support.
Right, they're a support role. They're not a DPS or anything else. And I think I really like it. I mean, personally for me, I loved watching them weave back and forth between the different songs. It felt way more than just push a button and then push another button. There was like thought that kind of goes into it, like, okay, what do they need? What can I supply? When is this running out? What should I do next? Should I keep it up? Should I do a different one? Like, there's a bunch of things there. Plus, I like the debuffing of the enemies nearby. I don't know. It was like way more interesting to me than I expected the bard to play. But I'm curious to see, like, again, any class can use any weapon. Does that tome then mean that it could be used by a cleric or a summoner, and how would that look when a cleric or a summoner is using that tome? These are like questions that I'm curious to find out.
Absolutely. I just want to see the book made a little smaller myself.
Yeah.
You don't like the big book?
Not that big.
A lot of people didn't. They wanted it a little bit smaller, like 20-30% smaller.
Yeah, give me a good 20% smaller.
Hey, if a shield can cover a whole Dunir dwarf, I want a bigger book. Give me a book to cover my whole character.
Encyclopedia Magica. All volumes.
That's right.
I love it. Theo says, reminds me a bit of Lucio from Overwatch. AoE continuous certain type of buffs. Continuous certain type. Yeah, exactly. Should be Divine Diamond Tetrahedron.
Yeah, basically.
Wizard says that it looked fine. Honestly, I don't know. I like it. From my experience of doing the Node Wars, combat felt very much like reactive versus like rotational. And that's something that I actually end up mentioning in the video that I put out earlier today, where I was talking about my experience on Node Wars. And it's just like one of those things that I almost didn't realize that I was doing reactive combat. I was just looking at what was happening around me and then reacting and adjusting as needed.
Right.
And that's kind of how the bard looked to me. What do you think, Vertec?
Bard looked, I mean, it looked very much flexible for any situation. Could be, depending on how much of a mastery they have on the different classes, what the different classes need, what kind of situation you're running into. They could be very proactive, getting stuff, prepped up ahead of time. But like, there's some good reactive elements in there. Like it, I just say I have to agree with a lot of the sentiment that's been even in our Discord, which is, after seeing the Bard showcase, a lot of other archetypes, other archetype mains, or people looking to main other archetypes, are looking at it going, so We gonna get some of that love or not?
Yeah, I've heard that across our community and a few others. What about you, Vlhadus? Have people in your community been kind of like, all right, so Bard looked cool. Can we move that up?
the thing is that the way the Bard plays, as far as like, you know, the song, there's like 4 major categories that you're kind of like in your head thinking about as a Bard.
Yeah.
The cleric should kind of feel, I wouldn't say as similar, right? Like a 1-to-1, but you know, again, the cleric is also a sort of a support class as well, but in a different way, right? Towards the healing factors. And I felt like the Bard better showcased gameplay and moment-to-moment ability combat in a more fun and engaging way than the Bard was. Or, I'm sorry, than the cleric was.
Yeah.
The cleric was so straightforward and just boring. Like I'm
gonna be honest. On that specific point that you just made, there's a few people that said that they were looking to cleric. They saw the cleric showcase and they were kind of like, I don't know. And then they saw the Bard showcase and they're like, dude, Bard. That's
right. and the thing is that I feel like it's having the identities of like certain abilities, right? So it's like the reason why I think for me, and I think a lot of other people that were very captivated by the Bard showcase, is because of the different categories of spells, right? So you have all the songs, you have all the dances, you have like the sagas, you know, like you have all these different things that you're in your mind, you're trying to juggle, right? And then again, the masteries on top of that too, right? So the talent tree had different masteries that almost completely changed the way you think of your combat and the way you do your abilities. That is all good. Like that, I love all that customization. But again, if you go look at some of the other classes, they feel very one-dimensional, while the Bard felt very three-dimensional. And I think that's the main thing, that we kind of start getting these very flat classes and making them a little bit more well-rounded, a little bit more just more fun. Right. And again, it's not talking about the VFX and all of the animations they put into those spells or whatever for the cleric, but I think it's mostly the moment-to-moment gameplay. It's the decision-making processes of the abilities and how those abilities influence and how you can change those abilities even at a base level. Like I know everyone always wants to talk about the augment system, but let's be honest, the augment systems can provide 1 of 4 options. That's it. There should be more customization beyond that.
Rucka says, before Bard, I was already like, dude, Bard. Now I'm like, dude, Bard.
Dude, Bard.
And that's fair. I mean, when you can tell when they put a lot of love into something. I mean, just look at the fighter showcase compared to the tank showcase. The archer and mage showcases in their own respects have some parts where it's like, oh my gosh, look at the effort that they put into that, and you can really tell. And I'm not saying that they didn't put in effort into the cleric. I'm just saying that like the cleric has its like showcase, but it's just, while it's thought out, it doesn't feel as thought out as some of the newer classes do.
I was going to say, Thresher, I completely 1000% agree with you. Again, as a WoW player, I don't want to homogenize classes in Ashes of Creation. You look at classic WoW, every class, and I've talked about this on my stream, I've talked about this on my 1v1s with my guests. I miss when classes had very good strengths and very obvious weaknesses. Now in MMOs, all class designers from companies all want to do is make it to where no class has any weakness. Oh, you have a warrior? Well, guess what? Your warrior can heal. Oh, and your warrior has like amazing speed and utility and defensives and offensives, and it has everything. Like every class just has everything. I think that's very poor design. And again, all I'm advocating for is the customizing of the kits that are present in Ashes. And I don't want the Bard to be a DPS, to be a tank, to be a healer. Like I want the Bard to be the Bard, but I want it to be able to be customizable in the way that you as a Bard player can feel like, well, I'm going to play this spell with these 3 customizations. And then you're going to meet someone else and be like, oh, I don't even have that ability at all. And I have this 2 spells with only 2 customizations because I'm also playing this other weapon that complements my basic attacks to my combos. Like that's the thing. Like I want it to get that nerdy. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. Like I don't want to. I think homogenization is utterly garbage. I think it's poor. I think it's just poor overall design. And again, WoW faces a lot of problems PvP wise. And again, we're also looking at a game with Ashes and again, having clear weaknesses in classes, because again, Steven mentions rock, paper, scissors. I don't remember paper ever beating scissors. Do you?
Right.
Right.
No.
So there's classes that are going to have some very clear weaknesses, especially at a 1v1 level. But this is why they're trying to balance at a group level with the whole 8 primary archetypes.
I would like to see the augments kind of raise you from a paper to a more like rocky paper.
Cardboard,
you know, or more scissory
like
paper.
carpenter paper or something like that.
Carpenter paper.
from regular paper to sandpaper, so it resists and harms the scissors a little bit. It's still going to lose, but
pocket sand.
Yeah, pocket sand.
But
no, I agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah, phone book. Oh my gosh.
That's right.
So that actually brings me to the next question. This is from Zapper on the forums, and Zapper is wondering, Bard, is it a nice to have or is it a necessity? And they really like to think that Bard will be pretty much necessary rather than just a nice to have, especially considering all of the that was happening. But what do you think? Do you think that Bard is going to be like a nice to have in a party, or like we need to have a Bard in our party?
Okay, so it's like let's bring that out of the Bard discussion and talk about, is tank a necessity to have, or is it just good to maybe have around? Like, because I think, and as far as you're going to do group content, I think a tank is necessary. Like, especially if I'm a DPS, right? Is a cleric necessary? Well, maybe in certain group content, maybe not. If there's more DPS, maybe there isn't the need for heals. But again, for dungeon design, group content design, a cleric is necessary. I think the Bard is meant to be pretty necessary. I think you can have, just like you can have a group without a cleric, you can have a group without a tank. It's going to feel very odd. It's going to feel very weird. And there's going to be certain things that you're going to have to compensate for the lack of that class.
Right.
And that's how the Bard is supposed to feel. Because again, we're not talking just the difference between a rogue to a fighter to a ranger to a mage. We're talking the difference of one of the Holy Diamond, right? We're talking, this is the big archetypes, right? So I think a lot of people, because they either have never played a Bard, they feel like, oh, well, I don't want this particular archetype to feel too necessary. But that's like, again, say that about the cleric. Oh, I just don't want the cleric to feel really too necessary in this game. Like, what are we really talking about here, right? Like, I think if it's meant to be at that level to stand amongst the titans of the Trinity, they should be at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is in a game where the Bard has been created and it exists, and looking at how it's designed, it's going to be a necessity. In a game where it wasn't created and it didn't already exist, it could probably be a nice to have.
Yeah.
But if it's going to exist and the way they have it designed, it's going to be a necessity, I feel.
I mean, look at Lotro. Every Lotro player that I've ever talked to, like, I always ask them, did you ever have like a Bard in your party or in your raid team or whatever? And they're like, yeah, all the time. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, and I think they weren't really called Bards, and they were minstrels in Lord of the Rings. But yeah, they were very much required. They were powerhouses. Again, like, they were just, again, super nice to have, but it was very much mandatory for a lot of raid groups. So again, I don't really see the problem in that, because it's like, what kind of discussion are we trying to have here? Like, if we're talking the Holy Trinity, like, if we're trying to say, well, I don't think the Bard, or I don't think the tank should really be required for groups, right? Like, I think, you know, the fighter class or the rogue class should be able to tank if needed. It's like, well, then we're really not talking about a Trinity system anymore, right? We're talking more of what Guild Wars 2 did. And did that work out for Guild Wars 2? It did not.
Yeah. And honestly, for me, what I'm gathering is that, like, Bard would be really handy for small groups. Plus, because I think those buffs, either buffs for yourselves or debuffs on the enemies, as who was it? There we go. Chico says anything larger than one group will be necessary. A damage debuff on enemies will be a must-have. Bill Mist Warren says Bard will be required for any long battle. Beaver says Bard provides so much to the party, it will be a must. AV says, honestly, if it's a balance, it should be not required, but the bard is support, so it increase the ability to accomplish goals, but it should not be needed. Pupo says, if you do not have a bard in a party when delving far into a dungeon, who will sing the happy songs to keep people's spirits up? Who will tell stories when camping the rare mob in the dark and dangerous room in the caves, the deep, to keep the group entertained? And I mean, honestly, I think that like the bard itself is going to be very instrumental to the depths and lengths that you can go as a party. Keeping up mana means that the healer doesn't have to stop as often.
Right.
It means
and
that
neither does their DPS as well.
Exactly.
They require mana too.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It means that the DPS and I think maybe tank or fighter, I forgot which one might need mana. I think the other one has rage.
Right.
But like that means that they can go longer times without having to rest as often, which means that maybe getting stuck between mobs or something like that, or like having to sit down and then mobs kind of reappearing on top of you as you're trying to like mana up won't be as big of a thing.
So we were talking earlier about strengths and weaknesses, right? The reason why I love that design is because that's why certain classes are required, because many classes have that kind of same weakness, and this one class brings that as a strength. So that's your weakness, but this is actually my forte.
Right.
And that's what creates the whole group dynamic, right? Is because if the only way we can have this discussion is if it wasn't really needed, then that's homogenization. Then we're talking about all classes could sort of kind of do everything pretty well, not the best, but well enough. So now we're having a discussion. Oh yeah, like the bard is nice to have, but it's not needed. Like, and the cleric's nice to have, but it's not needed. Like, that's homogenization. Like, if you go look at any class, any kind of class design from old MMOs, like 2000 to 2009, all of those kinds of classes had very far weaknesses. Like, again, you had even DPS classes that just really excelled in single target damage. And then if you really wanted like big AoE stuff, then you had to bring in a whole other class for that. You know, again, like we've gotten very used to doing everything. Like as a DPS, I can do single target, I can do cleave, I can do full AoE, I can tank, I can heal. Like, that's not going to feel, or you're not going to have that feeling at all in Ashes. Like you're going to feel very almost one-dimensional, but that dimension is going to feel like that's where you are supposed to be. That's your lane.
Yeah, and Davey Wavy on the sorry, one more thing real quick. Sorry, Bertek. Davey Wavy says, I believe they're trying to design it so you'll want one of each archetype in any given party of 8.
That's exactly how they're designing it.
Yeah, but Bertek, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say that, I mean, regardless if that's how they're designing the game, I think it's going to end up feeling in the end like you do, kind of like you were saying there, Vlad. It's going to have a feeling of you do need all the classes in there. But aside from that, like if you really think about it, you also have to define, if we're really going to have this conversation, we got to define what does necessary mean.
Right.
Because in an open world type setup, you could probably get rid of almost any single class if you have enough brute force in the other areas to just not deal with it. Like if you didn't have, or you didn't want to bring a cleric, you could probably bring a couple bards, right? If you didn't want to bring a tank, you could probably just bring some very strong fighters and just have them take turns keeping the highest threat level, and everyone else just needs to take their time as a DPS, and you don't need a tank.
Yeah.
So it really kind of depends on what need means, and I would say need is like within reasonable efforts, can you avoid using this class? And I just don't think that's going to be a thing with, as it was mentioned both in the chat here in Twitch and then on the forum post as well, like the mana issues alone are going to necessitate a bard.
Rizla says Final Fantasy XI had a bard and it was great. It offered buffs for the party, which kept the party going. Mana was a regenerative feature in that game, so you had to literally wait for mana to restore. So that's an interesting insight for Final Fantasy XI. Then they followed up saying, heck, SWG had an entertainer class, which their buffs were really required. for a lot of content, but they could buff in cantinas and give long hour buffs almost as a social class. I thought that was really interesting. Keyboard says risk versus reward. Avi says, so basically what you guys are saying is that we will have cookie cutter groups for the meta. Boring. And I said, no, not really. I think that there's typical things that you need to start with, but honestly, I don't think, like, sure, your typical whatever might become a meta, but there's going to be groups that go beyond that figure out, especially in these guilds, right? You got these Vlhadus's guild, you got our guild, you know, people are going to talk and work together, and we're going to realize, hey, this skill works really well off of that skill that you have, and if you make that skill, I do this skill after that, like, this would make this build important for me to bring, even if it's not the typical meta group comp to bring.
Well, yeah. I don't understand why that's boring, because it's like saying, oh, well, there's a world boss. Oh, well, the meta is to bring a tank and healer and DPS. Boring. Like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're talking about it as in the sense of a Trinity, and I am more talking about it in the sense of, again, I am very much the customization guy. I want there to feel like where this, you don't want to bring that bard because that bard more specializes in mana, and this other bard specializes more in heals, right? So it is going to get niche in that sense with secondary augments and with customization and with their ability allocation or what they decided to have or whatever. It is going to get niche in that way. But again, for certain bits of content, right, there is going to be a kind of required classes. You know what I mean? And I just think these four, which is the tank, the cleric, any one DPS, and then the bard, is going to be sort of required.
Yeah, then that's the thing, right? Is that's how the game is going to be designed. It's kind of like saying that the meta is to have PvP exist around PvE targets. Well, yeah, that's how the game is designed. So yeah, you need to be available to do PvP while doing your PvE stuff. So some people, we'll leave them unnamed, would like some other solutions to the PvE versus PvE thing, but are facing slowly that it may not be an option. But yeah, that's not necessarily the meta so much as that's how the game is going to be designed, like flat out. Like that's been stated many times. Like it's going to be balanced around group play, and it's going to be balanced around the full party of 8 and having one of every class. So it's not so much a meta so much as that's the design.
Well, I really hope that the meta is not going to become and have multiple bards in your party, because I remember Steven saying during the bard showcase that it's like if you have a secondary bard and you have one song active,
not really like overlapping.
Like you can have two bards with two songs active simultaneously, and I feel like as a raid lead, well, why wouldn't you want that, right? And so that's my whole fear too with the summoner, because the summoner is kind of like this jack of all trades sort of class. Like we really don't know that much about it. I hope the strengths that it decides to bring isn't a jack of all trades approach, because I feel like that is going to be the very first class that'll be benched, because then the meta will be to have two bards in your party and then all of the other 7 or all the other 6 archetypes present without the summoner, because the summoner doesn't really bring anything too well. The bard brings more towards the party. It's easier, it's better. Like that's what I hope doesn't happen personally.
I don't quite agree, because while bard is like a bunch of buffs and debuffs, I think summoner is much more like jack of all trades in the type of way that you can do DPS. I think that you can do maybe help with a little bit of healing, even if it's like minimal, or like help with a little bit more of like damage mitigation. I think that does a lot more than what bard could do in a different way, you know?
Right.
But it all depends on how they build it to that point.
Well, again, it's just a fear of mine. Like, I hope that isn't the case.
Yeah.
But I mean, people were talking about that at a lot of the discords that I hopped into. People are like, oh yeah, we're probably going to stack bards. It's like, okay.
But I mean, also, I do hope that the lack, if you do double stack bards, you're losing a cleric potentially, because there's no reason to have 3 healing classes. Otherwise, you're having 3 healing capable classes and then probably a tank, and now you have very limited options for an off tank and DPS versus somebody who's going to bring more of a well-rounded class group composition. but a couple of things from chat. Double bard will 100% be a thing. You need one focused on group buffs and the other focused on enemy debuffs. B versus I'll be a summoner. AV says, well, until recently it was the Trinity, not the Quadinity. Not sure how to say group before. Personally, I think Bard is OP, and I think it will be nerfed. 2 bards equals
Possibly.
less DPS. Wonder if raids change. If raids will change if you don't have certain classes, or rewards will then change. That's a consideration. Rizlo says, I love the addition of 4 role tank, DPS, healer, and support. I miss the days when you had controller roles that had us sleep enemies and so forth. And see, that's where I think that there's like some things like that within mage and other classes, which kind of brings me to another conversation on control class, and if control classes are missing in Ashes, being that, you know, there's like the typical idea of a Trinity, but I mean, we're looking at things like the Bard, and we're looking at things like Mage with their ice capabilities, and you know, tanks having the ability to do control. What are your guys' thoughts? And this is the forum that I'm kind of pulling that from.
Yeah, I mean, Vlhadus, I agree with him. The tank is the control class. Personally, I mean, it should be the control class. You are the leader in dictating where your group is going, how the ads are meant to be handled. You are the handler of all of the enemies, right? So you have to be able to control the flow of battle in that kind of way. And again, we haven't. It's kind of unfortunate because I really want them to do another tank showcase personally. Yeah. Because the tank showcase last year in January wasn't the best, right? And I think they've gotten more of a stride now in how they've been unveiling the class showcases. And I honestly think from a lot of the players in the Node Wars that were playing tank said that the tank felt really good. So maybe they've improved, maybe they've changed or updated a lot of the stuff that we saw back in January of last year. So I think presenting the tank again would actually be pretty cool. Again, I am a huge advocate for the Trinity or the Diamond, whatever we want to call it, because I really want, especially these two, the tank and the healer is my primary concern, because there needs to be a lot of heavy lifting those two classes need to do.
Yeah. Vertek, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the tank is kind of the same thing. The tank is kind of intended to be that control class, or control archetype rather, and the different, you know, classes that spawned from the tank archetype are going to be just different versions of doing that. But I was thinking, how neat would it be though if one of the classes had basically a dump threat type skill. Speaking of controlling the battlefield, that could be something interesting in a situation where there's a group trying to do some PvE content and some PvP folks come in and want to mess with it. If you just dump all the bosses aggro on whoever's trying to mess with the group. Yeah. And it points at whoever you off taunts to for the next 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. That'd be an interesting way to break up a raid sabotage attempt.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I could see that.
I'm just excited for, like I said, I want to see more of the class design. I want to see more abilities. I want to see, you know, the newest template personally, there were some things I liked about the Bard talent tree, but not much, to be honest with you. I think that iteration is not it either. The mage one was also, like I said, I haven't seen any talent tree that just, oh yes, we're on the right track. Like
it fits for what you're thinking. Yeah.
Yes. Or just fits in general, like for the game. Like I just, again, and I know this is probably their idea phase, right? Like, okay, we got to see what works, right? And then we got to get the feedback from our community to see like what is liked. And again, I'm not like the authority on what they decide to choose. And again, if this is what they're trying to do and they're like Intrepid or Steven is like, yeah, these talent trees, this is what we're going to do. This is the final design or the final, you know, this is our foundation. Okay, cool. Yeah. If that's the case, then I will build as best I can on this foundation. But if we're still talking about potentially changing it, like I'm going to leave feedback on how we can maybe change it to feel a little bit better.
Yeah. And some stuff from the chat. Brian says main tank is sort of wide mitigation. Off tank is battlefield control. Mione says Vanguard needs more love.
That's so true. It does need more love.
Ryzo says that they did mention something about siege summons during the Bard stream. Some PvP summoners may be even more important depending on what that meant. And I think that there's like, that's a good point that, you know, depending on what content you're doing will depend on what you bring to said content. Who knows? There might be different stats for different like bosses that go around the world. So like the boss in Miraleth might be a different strat than the boss in Winstead or the boss wherever else. And I think those are all
sorry, go ahead and finish.
Those are all good things to consider, but I want to also touch real quick because you said that you think they should do another showcase. I think they should do that after a bit of Alpha 2 testing, when they get things kind of really set in place after they get all 8 in, because I'd like to see the other 2 that we haven't seen yet before going back to the beginning again. Go ahead, Vertex, sorry.
I was just going to staple on to the points you were making, that how I was talking earlier, how the game being designed around a party of 8 and one of each archetype in the party being the game design, that's the starting point. That doesn't necessarily define what a meta is. That's how it's designed. Then you can break the design, right? Depending on the situation.
Right. Oh, it's all good. It's all good, Dougbug. Dougbug wants to know what you don't like about the talent tree system. Actually, Doug, I really highly suggest, and it's pinned at the top of the chat. That is all of Vlhadus's links. I highly recommend you go check him out. He likes to talk a lot about skill trees and classes and things like that, and he's making a video soon going into his skill tree opinions. But in short, if you could do it in like a one sentence, what don't you like about skill trees?
In a sentence, the lack of customization.
Ventharian says because he's a madman.
Fair. True. All the customization. Fair. I want all the customization. Yeah,
that's fair. I am not trying to bring us short. We did get a little late into starting. Just by a smidgen, but I want to try and just touch on a few things. Ashes of Creation has their new official dev discussion number 66 on storytelling with archetypes, and my intent is to talk about this on Tuesday. So for those of you that are content creators, people that have hung out in our Discord, been on our show before, we welcome you into the tavern on Tuesdays to come and chat with us. And that is what I would like to cover on Tuesday, is something that I am super excited to talk about. Just also as a reminder, there's an AMA with Steven this coming Friday. Now that we're in Saturday, I can say that. So I'm really excited for that one. And we'll be having Jamie and Annie on next week to talk about that. But of course, Bayzul is here. So of course I have to pick on Bayzul. Bayzul's art was the character art or the fan art Friday this week for Intrepid. And I just wanted to share it because it's cute. Fellow Pyre. I'm a Pyre main, and Bayzul is also Pyre. I thought this was super adorable. So I wanted to share that out. Just some like really quick, like just spitballing it out there. And finally, I'm really proud of this. It actually seemed to be received really well. I made my first video in a long time. I think I made videos back before we made TGF, and this was the first one that I've actually made that's curated. It has a script. I went through everything. So I'm really excited. This is where I'm talking about like node wars, and I actually go into my experience as a cleric versus Burgund's experience as a cleric versus Phantom NX experience as a cleric, and all of us, even though we played cleric with the same options, had different experiences, and I just kind of go through that, as well as I like PvE. I'm a PvE primary person, so I talk a little bit about that. With Grumpy here, I'm a human master race type of guy. Fair. Kalar. Okay. But yeah, those are some things that I wanted to share. But Vlhadus, is there anything that you want to tell the people that's coming up that you're wanting them to especially come and chat with? Oh, Garcimile, thank you. I have more in the plans. I'd like to do more videos. If you guys have ideas, especially as subscribers, give me those ideas. I'll take them.
Absolutely. No, I really don't have anything like super. I mean, I'm going to be streaming tomorrow at 11 a.m. if I can sleep. My plan is to stream tomorrow regardless, like when I wake up or whatever. But yeah, for the most part, I'm just going to be like hanging out this next week. I don't know really my streaming schedule with my wife being back, and I'm taking care of the kiddos again. But no, I'm just excited. I'm going to be streaming. I'm going to try to stream as much as I can. Probably going to be more in the afternoons and stuff like that. But the goal is to try to stream more or a couple of times during the day to kind of hit the EU audience, because I know they were very appreciative of of me streaming pretty early, because there really isn't any Ashes creators streaming at 11 a.m. in the morning. So that's been a lot of fun to talk and to engage with them as well. So yeah, nothing really too much.
I wish I could do a little earlier in the day too. Sometimes
I know.
I'm so busy.
I know. We're all working.
Yes.
Any word on when Steven is going to give you the interview?
I think we're both waiting on that, aren't we?
Yeah. Like I said, as the last time I heard from Margaret, and I have not tried to bug her, she says, I think she told me verbatim, like I said, I will reach out to you. That's literally what she told me. So I'm just gonna be like, okay, Margaret, I got you. I'm just, I'm just gonna, but I do have some guests that I have potentially coming up for 1v1s too. So it's gonna be good. It's gonna be exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. And for those of you that missed it, we were actually recently one of his bonus episodes of 1v1. So you should go check that out. And I will link that also in the description of the YouTube video once we get everything updated later with the timestamps and stuff. So yeah, don't call us. We'll call you.
Fupo, was that a really Friends busy, theme song reference there? She'll reach out to you.
Jesus.
All right, well, it is 8:08 and I'm looking for somebody to go raid. But in the meantime, if you guys liked this kind of content, we are live Tuesdays for our tavern talk, and now Saturdays instead of Fridays. We were Fridays. But every Saturday for our podcast. And we have our roleplay summit. If you are a role player and you like to roleplay in video games, or have never roleplayed in a video game but want to talk about how you'd like to see it done in Ashes, we have our roleplay summit coming up on September 14th. And we have the forum open for people to come and request to be a part of that. This will be the first one we're actually opening up to people that aren't just on our show previously. But yeah, very excited for that. It'll be the roleplay summit, and if you want to see more of this, hit the subscribe button over on YouTube, hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the notification bell to see when we go live and when we post things, and and we appreciate you guys being here. And I'll kick it off to Vertuck to do the normal closey things.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out with us. And thank you for joining us, Vlad. As always, Vlhadus, we love you. We're always happy to have you.
Dude. Yeah, thank you, man. Always enjoy being here.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Thank you for chatting. Thank you for keeping us company and enjoying our absolute chaos sometimes. As a reminder, if anybody is happening to head out to... I'm drawing up with PAX West. My brain blanked as soon as I went to say it. Just please do let us know. We're going to be out there this year, so I'd like to see you folks. If you're not, that's cool. We'll catch you another time. But
yeah.
Anywho, your time is valuable. It's the most valuable thing you own, as you will never get any of it back. You cannot earn more You just can't.
Right.
So thank you for spending it here.
We
Much
can't give it back
appreciated.
to you either. Sorry.
Yeah. Womp womp.
But what you can do is, if you want to help us lovingly bully our guildmate into joining Alpha 2, we're going to raid over to Demon Soul Games, who is playing Dead by Daylight. And he has expressed an interest in being an Alpha 2. So I just kind of want to lovingly like raid him with Ashes people.
Yes.
To help convince him to definitely join us for Ashes. For Alpha 2.
You should totally ask him what questions he has, and then you can educate him.
Yeah,
right.
there you go. There we go.
Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate him on the game and get him super excited about it.
Yeah. He will be converted. We shall do it. And thank you guys. You guys are always great fun to have in the chat, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Everybody, take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.